What's up everybody, we finally got access to the Shadowlands Beta and just in time for some raid testing. So today we're taking a look at some of the bosses in the brand new raid that awaits us in Shadowlands, Castle Nathria. Before we start, I just want to point out that this is very early beta, so a lot of things will change, so this is by no means a guide on how to, and probably not how the encounters will end up once this goes live. Or maybe they will. With that said, the 4 bosses we got to try was Hungering Destroyer, Lady Inerva, Darkvein, Sun King Salvation, and Sludgefist. So let's start off with Hungering Destroyer. So right off the bat, this fight was pretty much unplayable. The lag was nothing short of amazing, which is fine. I mean, it is beta, but from what we got to see, it still looked like a pretty decent encounter all in all. Same tank mechanic as the one on Gahun back in Uldir, which is the Hungering Strike and Growing Hunger. Anytime the boss attacks, he also leeches X amount from the tank, and this damage is increased by X amount of percentages anytime he attacks. These stacks are instantly dropped when he switches targets, so just like on Gahun. Combine this with a big tank slam called Overwhelm that he casts every now and then that hits like an absolute truck, which was less than fun to deal with when you had a 4-second delay on Death Strike. Another borrowed mechanic is the Gluttonous Miasma, which reduces a player's healing received by 100%, but this player also leeches life from nearby players, so pretty much like on Unat back in Crucible of Storms. Boss will also target everyone in the raid with something called Expunge. Every player gets a circle around them, and after a few seconds it detonates. The circle around you gets larger the less HP you have. So be nice to your healers. The more they heal, the less you have to spread with this. On Heroic and Mythic, this also leaves an orb, or a rift as it's called in the dungeon journal, on the ground. And running over the rift or orb will knock you back and you take a bit of damage. So over the course of the fight there will be less and less space unless you can just immunity soak it all and clear the room. Lastly, Hungering Destroyer will also use an ability called Volatile Ejection. Targets 3 players and sends out a wave of energy towards them. Anyone hit by it takes a bit of damage, and subsequent hits of Volatile Ejection deals 500% more damage for 24 seconds. You'll have mechanics like the Miasma that requires a few players to stack due to the healing immunity so they can leech, and at the same time mechanics that requires you to spread a lot like Ejection and Expunge. Hard to give an honest opinion of it due to the massive amount of lag, which again is to be expected every now and then again on beta, but it looks like a decent fight with a lot of coordination and tons of tank damage, so will be interesting to see how it pans out over the course of beta and what they add on Mythic. Next one we got to try was Lady Inerva Darkvein. Pretty chaotic fight right off the bat, and I predict a lot of things will change here, both mechanically as well as visually. At least I hope visually, because there's a whole lot of red going on, and trying to track some mechanics was very difficult due to this. But the fight looks very promising in my opinion, with a lot of mechanics and abilities that changes over the course of the fight. So starting off, you have 4 vats around the room that would fill up with anima, and depending on the level or amount of anima in any given vat, new things happen, or rather abilities will upgrade, if you will. So the more filled up the vats are, the more mechanics you will have to deal with, and if you empty a vat you lose some mechanics, but everyone in the raid takes ticking damage. So the more you empty them, the more damage everyone takes. During the fight she will focus one vat for a bit, increasing its anima gains and making it so you cannot empty that one. So you will have to deal with all of the different upgraded abilities at one point or another during this fight. So for example, the tank mechanic Warp Desires, which is a stacking dot. At level 3 of the vat it will also trigger a new ability called Change of Heart on expiration, which is a proximity based raid-wide AoE, meaning most of the fight you tank swap per usual, but during this, said tank needs to be away from the raid when the dot ticks out. And a fun side note on the tank mechanic is the boss spawns an ad, or a vision if you will, at a random location around her that charges towards whichever tank is currently tanking. If said tank doesn't look at it, or at least in its general direction, it applies 2 stacks of the dot instead of 1. When we tested this could happen to anyone, which I assume is not intended, so if my co-tank got hit by my mini ad, he also got a stack, which unfortunately theoretically could refresh his current dots. But anyone in the raid who got hit by Tank's mini-ad got this stack, which is why I assume it's not intended. Anyways, she also throws bottles on the ground. These needs to be picked up or caught by players before they hit the ground. At level 2 they will spawn a puddle underneath the players when caught, and on level 3 they will bounce, so you need to catch it one more time. And if you don't catch the bottles and they hit the ground, they will do a massive amount of damage to everyone in the raid. She will also spawn a couple of orbs around the room. These will pulse AoE around them and persist until players afflicted by another mechanic called shared suffering links these orbs together with a beam. The beam, of course, is from the shared suffering that links players together. Now, the aforementioned orbs on the ground also upgrade, so at level 2 they will form their own beams between them, and at level 3 these beams rotate. As of now, 2 players will also be targeted by something called Unleashed Shadow, which was a large red circle around them. Upon expiration it deals a ton of damage to anyone within it, and it spawns add, 1 per circle. At level 2, Unleashed Shadow will also cause the players targeted by it to fire out fragments of shadow that deals a ton of damage to anyone hit. The adds that spawns, Harnessed Spectre and Unconscionable Guilt, will cast Condemn, which is a raid-wide AoE. The melee add will stop casting if engaged in melee combat, and range add needs to be interrupted. So in short, there's a lot going on, and it's ever changing, ever evolving by having all of these abilities happening throughout the fight, but on different levels, which for me at least makes it very interesting. I love hectic fights that aren't necessarily just a repeat of 2 mechanics. And the tank mechanic was a bit more engaging than the usual swap on 2. Only thing I'd like to fix is clearer visuals, especially for the tank mechanic. The mini-ad that spawns a red bloodish orb that turns into the mini-ad upon hitting the ground. Seeing the orb as it flies out gave you a lot more time to adjust than simply trying to find the ad once it had spawned. Problem was, the bloody orb looked like the other orbs around the room, like the flasks, like, well, pretty much any and all other mechanics going on. But other than that, it looks great, was a lot of fun, and it looks like it will be a very hectic fight on Mythic. Very curious to see how it evolves into Mythic. Next out, spoilers, is Kael'thas again, or the Sun King's Salvation as it's called. So it's Kael'thas, but kinda not. I haven't nerded the Shadowlands lore yet, but you aren't fighting Kael'thas, you seem to be helping him instead. This fight is just an AoE bonanza, constant stream of ads, a few more ads, and then another swarm of ads on top of that. Name of the game, kill ads and heal Kael'thas, but not like any other heal boss I've personally experienced or that I remember. So long story short, there's a ton of different ads that will spawn in waves. Some of these ads will carry essence fonts. Once defeated they will drop said fonts, and these needs to be healed up in order to heal Kael'thas. But there's also pedestals around the room where players can sacrifice their own health and transfer it to Kael'thas in an ever increasing damage taken channel. So starts off at like 7% of your own HP, and every tick increases the amount of damage you take. So by the end of it, it almost one-shots you. So throughout the fight you'll need to have players run out and channel into these pedestals whilst dealing with swarms of ads, and healers will have the fun job of keeping everyone alive and topping off these essence vials or fonts, whatever you want to call them, on the floor in order to heal Kael'thas. There were all kinds of ads to fill your AoE padding needs, swarms of small ads that needs to die fast, ads that charges around that needs to die fast, ads that will steal health from Kael'thas that needs to die fast, and big ads that also needs to die fast. Now, I won't cover every single thing these ads do, but needless to say, if you lag behind a bit on ad killing, it gets hectic real fast. On top of all of this, at certain health percentages that you heal Kael'thas up to, his shade will spawn and join in on the fun. Never got to test this part sadly, but again, more stuff going on, and I'd assume on Mythic you'll want to control when you get him to spawn to trigger it on certain waves of ads, which could be interesting figuring out. I'll say this though, at its current state, Bring Blood DK scripts are so good. All in all, looks to be a very fun, hectic AoE bonanza, and who doesn't like to pad the meters just a little bit? Stretch them old DPS legs. Moving on! Last one we got to try was the old Sludgefist. Just your average, semi-low mechanic patchwork fight. Tunings seem to be a bit off in my opinion, so hopefully they beef it up a lot in later iterations of it. It is one of the later bosses, so I really hope it's gonna be be tuned through the roof. Tank-wise, at the moment, nothing fancy. One tank tanks boss throughout the fight, second tank gets smacked when the first tank does. So he will always smack twice. If there's only one target in range, that target will get smacked twice instead. If there's a target in range, he splits it, if you will. And here's the first issue with tuning. It seemed very solo tankable, which I do hope it doesn't end up being. In the center of the room there is 4 pillars, and Sludgefist will fixate on a target. While testing this was always the active tank. After a few seconds, charge after that player. If Sludgefist hits a pillar, pillar breaks, boss gets stunned, takes more dam. If boss hits wall, everyone in the raid dies. So 4 pillars is the enrage, if you will, currently. He will also stomp every now and then, which is just a big AoE around him that knocks you back, deals damage, but if it hits a pillar, it will break him, meaning less pillars for the charges. He will also throw a chain on a random player. This player needs to link his chain to an unchained player. If these 2 chained players runs too far from each other, the chain breaks, deals lethal damage, and stuns the player if they happen to survive. The only way to get rid of the chain seems to be to break him if you can survive it, or you will just have to stay chained. And I assume the idea is for players to stay chained throughout the fight, so eventually everyone in the raid is paired up with someone. Adding to this, we will also root a random player with a chain slam, and a few sec after drag that player to him along with any other player that stands within the rooted player's chain slam circle. This will also deal a ton of damage split among all the players within it, adding some annoyance to the players that are chained. Not only will you need to split these, but if they are chained, they'll need to coordinate running away and out without breaking their own chains. Sludgefist will also use Stone Quake, works kinda like the Quake from good old Deep Beard in Eye of Azara in Legion. Earthquakey ground effect makes ouchies if you stand in it, spawns under players and will slowly fill up the room with more and more earthquakes or stone quakes. He will also make debris fall down and stun players if hit by it, and lastly he lets out a colossal roar every now and then, which is just an unavoidable AoE knockback. So assuming tuning is on point, there's a lot of mechanics that will make life miserable for chained players. Assuming tuning is off, not so much, and you just stack and heal through it. So yeah, not really a whole lot going on, but really not a bad fight either. And if you do get bored, you can always try and find interesting ways to make life more miserable for your pals in the raid. And that's pretty much it. All in all, with the little I've seen so far, I am very excited for this raid. Then again, I'm always hyped for new raids, it's a lot of fun. I hope you enjoyed this rant. I haven't done this type of content before, but I figured a look at the raids and bosses and testing made more sense than any half attempt at making a beta guide for the fight. Sure, I have a rough idea on how I'd like to execute the fights, but as previously mentioned, it is beta. A lot of things will change, so I'd much rather just go over the fights, then bring you the guides once it hits live, or if there's any weekend-long testing of the raids once the fights are more complete near the end of the beta. If you liked this video and would like to see more videos like this from the beta, let me know in the comments below. Been testing out some of the new dungeons as well, so there will probably be videos of this in the near future.
Ooh, that's
Can I do
good.
this? Yes, I could.
Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. Make sure to check out my Patreon and join my stanky Discord. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you next time.